Well, good evening, everybody. I think we're about to start. So if you want to just find a seat here in the sanctuary, and if you're at home, I hope you have already found a seat. If not, you definitely need to get one. You get to have, dinner or snacks or something like that. We're going to wait till afterwards. But I wanted to welcome everybody here to our, we've had about 15 different names for this end of life issues and discussion panel. Here is what I will say about this. Life is tender and precious, and we are all discovering our way through it together, from its beginning through all of the middles and through the end as well. It is good for us to do this as a community of faith, for surely there are issues there for us in faith. There are issues of our deepest values, those ways in which we have led our lives through all of our days. I am mindful today of the life of Ann Jackson, who died suddenly 2 nights ago. That is a reminder to us of how tender this life is. I went and sat with Ann and Dick's kids last night. And so I found myself remembering the last thing that I had read to Dick before he died, which was from Psalm 71. In you, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. Be to me a rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me, until I proclaim your might to all the generations to come. Your power and your righteousness, O God, reach the high heavens. The ways in which we live our lives informs who we are, informs the lives of those people who love us, our families, our children. And so these decisions are matters of weight and importance for us, for our spirits, and for the people around us. And so you'll hear us talk a number of different ways today about how to be in conversation with those people that you love and care for, so that they might be part of this discussion with you. But before we linger on too much and I get into a sermon, I think it's about time for me to introduce all the members of our panel. So pretty much everybody, we're going to say this is the all in-house affair, because I'm going to claim as an associate member Sarah Coburn as a daughter of this congregation. And Sarah is an attorney practicing here in Southern Maine, working particularly in issues of trusts and estates, and some of the legal issues that go around these questions of end of life. Deb Gray doesn't really need a whole bunch of introduction as our moderator. And so we give thanks for her leadership every day, but also for her work with the Southern Maine Agency on Aging. And so she has some experience in talking with loved ones and friends about these sorts of issues. And then finally, our member, Dr. Mark Wrona, who is a palliative care physician and walks very closely and has walked very closely with a number of our friends and members here, and does that as part of his daily life and vocation every day. So I'm going to ask them to introduce a little bit more about how they encounter these issues and these discussions with the folks that they walk with, and tell us a little bit about how they experience that. So why don't I start with Sarah as our welcome guest. So let's hand you the microphone so that you can be heard by folks at home.
Good.
There you go.
All right. Good. All right. Thank you so much, first of all, for welcoming me into your home. I do feel like this is a place that is near and dear to my heart. In my work, so I am what folks refer to as a trust and estates lawyer, estate planning. My job is to help families and individuals plan through all stages of life. I don't do family law work, but pretty much anything else associated with both trying to take care of my clients while they're alive and also making sure that their wishes are honored after they're gone falls within my purview. So people come to me, you can find yourself in my office at all stages of life. I talk with young families. I talk with people who are married, people who are unmarried. I talk with people who are sick, people who are well, people who are very sick. I work with people from all socioeconomic backgrounds and different levels of wealth. I think there's a misconception by many that you need to be wealthy, however that is defined, in order to come and talk to me, and I would dissuade you of that. My hope is that in your work with me, you would, I would be able to help guide the family and each of you individually through the process of planning for, again, while you're alive. How are we going to talk to the people and name the people who are going to make decisions for us if we are unable to do so for ourselves? That I think this was circulated. The Maine Advanced Healthcare Directive form is one of the forms that we use in our work. Also, we work with durable powers of attorney. That's related to your financial affairs. But I try to stress the importance of planning for those moments while we have control now, and that you are not necessarily giving up control, but you are trying to maintain control and have direction and self-determination about your wishes while you're alive, and making sure that you've named the people that you want, who you think will honor your wishes in a time of need. I also work with, of course, how to be a shepherd and how to transfer assets smoothly and efficiently after you are gone. Most people sit at my conference table and say, I need a will, and absolutely you do, but that is also just the beginning. I try to have a very holistic approach to my work. We work with wills, we work with, some people need trust, some people don't. I work with your financial advisors if you have them, or work with you individually related to how you title your assets. I think about taxes. I think about the beneficiary designations for your retirement accounts, your life insurance. I think about your family, most importantly, and how you describe and work with your family, and your family is defined for me as broadly or as narrowly as you do, whether it's a nuclear family, whether it's a family of your own making and choosing. I also think about charities, and I try to put all of that together as a plan. So the proverbial estate plan is what I do. And hopefully that all comes together in a way that, again, honors your wishes. In the ordinary course, that can take weeks, maybe months. I've certainly been at times when I've been to the Gosnell house, and we do it much faster than that when we need to. So I would, hopefully my goal is that I use the legal constructs that we have and the tools that we have to integrate with the medical care to make this as easy as possible. It is never easy, but just as comforting, and knowing that there's the security of that you made your choices ahead of time can bring families and my clients, hopefully, security and comfort in a time that can be otherwise obviously very difficult.
As Jeff said, my name's Mark Wrona. I am a physician and have been practicing for over 20 years now. For the last 13, that's been exclusively in the field of hospice and palliative care. And I was the medical director for Hospice of Southern Maine up until 8 years ago. And then I took a job with New England Cancer Specialists, primarily providing palliative care to cancer patients. And The way I explain the difference between palliative care and hospice is palliative care is all the good things that hospice provides, but before you end up having to be dying. Okay. So it's a focus on quality of life through excellent symptom control of things like pain, shortness of breath, nausea, loss of appetite, constipation, anxiety, fatigue, all those wonderful things that happen to go along with having cancer or going through treatment for cancer, as well as in a broader term for anyone with a chronic life-limiting illness. So that can be anything from individuals with heart failure, advanced lung disease like COPD or emphysema, dementia, Parkinson's disease, ALS. So the idea is to allow people to maximize their quality of life through excellent physical, emotional, even often existential management of what they're going through so they can have the best quality of life possible. I also help patients when it's time to transition from being on active treatment because it is either no longer working or they're no longer eligible for things like chemotherapy or radiation, to then move on to hospice for the end of their life to be maximized in quality and comfort and to have their loved ones who are providing their care to also be supported. I, in addition, will help cancer survivors who are left with symptoms related to their treatment that impact their quality of life. So while all of my patients die, as do every other physicians out there, okay, not all of my patients are facing a short-term prognosis. So in addition to managing symptoms, prescribing medications, I also have serious illness conversations with people every day, asking them what provides quality to your life, what makes your life worth living. What are you willing to potentially sacrifice quality in regards to the treatments you're being offered? And what won't you sacrifice? So it's a lot of trying to get patients to reflect and assess where the quality in their life comes from and trying to provide some guidance for decisions they need to make. I often say my most important job is to be an advocate for my patients, right? So that they're being heard about what's impacting their quality of life so it can be addressed. So that's my daily job. I see patients in the hospital as well as in the clinic. There was a landmark study about 13 years ago which demonstrated when patients with advanced lung cancers, right, are provided palliative care close to the time of their diagnosis rather than waiting until the last 6 months of their life, they actually live longer with a greater quality of life. So that's been kind of a huge driver within my field to start to get palliative care to every patient who could potentially benefit and to get it out of the hospital and out into the clinics and in the community where more patients would really benefit from it.
So again, my name is Deb Gray. I've been a volunteer with Southern Maine Agency on Aging for a little over 8 years now. The agency provides services and resources to older adults and their caregivers in primarily Cumberland and York counties. And one of the programs that they offered a few years ago was a training through a program called Respecting Choices, which train facilitators to sit with people and help them complete the Maine Healthcare Advanced Directive. And this is something that I'm sure every time you go to your doctor's office, they said you have an advanced directive, and you say, haven't really gotten around to it. So a lot of the referrals that we received at Southern Maine Agency on Aging were from doctors. And it's something that really is an important consideration when you've talked with your attorney, you've talked with your doctor, to then talk with your family and have a meaningful conversation about your healthcare choices toward the end of life. 80% of people believe that this is an important discussion and important to think about your choices and make them known, but only about 20% of people ever do it. So my mission tonight is to encourage at least those who are listening to complete the advanced directive. And really the form is the end product of a process of sitting down with your family. I know it's sometimes a difficult subject to talk about, but just pick a time, whether it's when you're going to get together anyway, or just say, my goal before my next birthday or after my next doctor's appointment, I'm going to do it. But have these conversations, as Mark said, about what's important to you. What is a meaningful life to you? If you had a good day, what would that mean to you? Do you have fears about death? Do you have fears about what a bad death might be? Do you have concerns about being kept comfortable, and when perhaps your care should move from curative care to palliative care? So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about and also discuss with your family so that they know what your wishes are. The form is a vehicle for memorializing those wishes, but it's also important for your family and loved ones to know your wishes as well. We can go through the form, but
I'm going to break in and talk a little bit about how this fits into our life together as the church, and a little bit of what my work and role is working across all of these groups. So I kind of came in through Mark's world. All clergy, most clergy in the United Church of Christ at this point are required to do a hospital chaplaincy in order to be ordained. And so I did my work down in Bridgeport Hospital, part of the Yale New Haven hospital system, as the chaplain to an oncology and hospice wing, and also the burn unit in that hospital. Because I liked having long-standing relationships with my patients. And anybody who's ever had a hip or a knee know that they kick you out pretty much the second you can move again. So it was a rich experience of listening to people's stories, helping them to make sense of, we don't often think about what has been most meaningful in my life. I encourage you to do that on any given day that ends in Y, but as we are nearing the end of life, often that's a really important conversation for us to have with one another, to reflect on, what has this meant? What's most important about the relationships that I have? How do I want to engage with people? As, let's just go ahead and say, I don't know about you. I wake up in the morning now, I make different noises than I used to make when I got out of bed. How about you? Yes? That's because all of us lose function, mobility, all those sorts of, that's going to happen to all of us. I like Mark's reminder that indeed, everybody is batting zero when it comes to keeping everyone alive indefinitely. Each one of those losses is a grief in some way. And it can be buoyed by the hope and the joy of what gives us those gifts in our life. And so reflecting on that is important. It led me through a little bit of understanding that, in fact, we do need to think about legally how we designate people to help manage our affairs. For many of us, there may come a time in our lives where we can't manage our own finances quite as easily. And so it's good to have someone in place to know how to be able to do that. I will go ahead and make a brief advertisement. There's a little slip in the back. It's sometimes handy to make sure that some communities that you care about, like your church, has some emergency contacts for you. So if we needed to get in touch with a family member, if there was a concern, because you know what? I'm likely to tell if you don't show up after a little bit. And if I have somebody to call, I'm going to do it. So thinking about how those things are going to be managed, what are the most important things that those people need to know? We don't talk about death. It's one of those things that there are a number of things that we all do that we don't talk about. We need to do that more with our loved ones. It is heavy, but it is also how we do that bit of telling God's glory in our lives through the generations, so that they understand what has brought us meaning, so that they can help us carry that on through managing our financial affairs while we're still alive, to afterwards, and helping to make difficult decisions around medical care when we may not be able to do that ourselves. And so for me, that's a faith practice. And so I'm just full of commercials today. The patio is open. You can come sit with me any day, and we can gladly talk about all of these issues. And then I'll refer you to professionals. That conversation around the advance directive, all these sorts of making your wishes known that Deb was telling you about. Let me tell you, the time to have those conversations is now, not later. Because family members in crisis, I mean, if you've ever been in a crisis with your family, it's a terrible time. And to suddenly be faced with having to make really weighty decisions on behalf of someone you love when you didn't perhaps even know that you were identified as that person who was going to have to make that decision. So it's a gift that you can give to your family to have these conversations earlier. And it makes it lighter, because it can be about what are your deepest values, instead of, an ER doctor this far away from your face. Nobody's this far away from anybody anymore, but an ER doctor suddenly in your face is a moment that nobody wants to have to bear, in comparison with, let's talk about this openly. Other things that you all want to bring up from your lives, and then we can start taking some questions from folks here.
So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to complete an advance directive, okay? And my advice is anyone over 18, whether they have a chronic illness or not, okay, should complete one, right? Primarily because your family and your medical care needs to know who's going to make decisions for you if you cannot, okay? And often the biggest roadblock I run into for why patients won't fill them out is because they're afraid when they do, something is set in stone, and it is completely not. So often the biggest takeaway message I'm giving patients when I first introduced the idea of an advance directive is none of what's written on that paper, okay, is going to apply as long as that patient can tell me what they want, okay? So the medical term is capacity. As long as you have medical decision-making capacity, and all that means is you understand the consequences of the decisions you're making, okay? Then you can tell me or any other medical provider what you want, and we will do what you say, okay? So this only comes into play when you've lost capacity. So you're confused, you're passed out. Then we've got to know, all right, what should we be doing? Right? And the person who's making that decision needs to know what you want, right? if you go through the form itself, right, particularly if you have the, any medical training, there is a lot of gray area for interpretation within what you can choose. Okay. So it's really important you have these awkward conversations, okay, about what you're willing to go through. Okay. And then if there are questions about some of these decisions, you talk it through with your primary care doctor or your physician who's helping you through whatever you're dealing with. Okay. Right. But it's crucial. If it's not written down, it's completely up to anyone's interpretation. And if you haven't had the conversation, they're not going to know what to do. And I'm often convincing people that, yes, they do have to fill it out, because they'll make comments about, oh, they'll know what to do. If you don't have the conversation, trust me, they won't. Okay. So, and unfortunately, there are a lot of things that doctors can do to you, which can often cause more harm than really good to your well-being at times. Okay. And it's not done out of malice. It's done out of often desperation because no one's had the discussion.
When clients are sitting at my table, they often ask me, who should I pick? Or who do people usually pick for this role? I get asked that a lot. Or shouldn't I pick this person? And I don't know whether this is right or wrong. I would welcome your input on this, but the advice that I do give them is, and that I do see in practice as well, is to try to choose someone who is going to honor your wishes. So I would disclose, I've said this to my mother, if my husband can't make those medical decisions for me, I've chosen my brother, because I don't know whether my mother's really going to pull the plug on me or not, so to speak, right? She's too nice. But I say that with all the love in the world. I don't want to put her in that position. So I just, I have clients who sit and say it should be the oldest child. It should be this person because they have medical training. It should be that person. And I would just encourage you to trust your own instincts about the people that you know, to say, who is it that is going to honor my wishes, or what group of people? But, I think it's hard. It's real hard.
Part of why that's so important, I would add, is they're under no legal obligation to follow your wishes. Okay. So when you fill out that document, all right, so there's nothing in there that says they have to do what you want. So that's why you want to be really wise about who you choose, so that you know they will follow your wishes. Right? And I can't tell you the number of times I have difficult meetings with family members because someone has gone to the trouble and filled out what they want, but their medical decision maker won't go along with it. And it causes a lot of chaos.
Or their healthcare agent doesn't know it. This is when you choose your healthcare agent, choose carefully. It doesn't have to be the oldest child or whatever, or your partner. It needs to be someone who will respect your choices, your wishes, even if they conflict with yours. So before choosing the agent, sit down and talk with that person. Make sure that they understand the role they're playing, that they're going to be looking at having sensitive conversations with you and others, that there may be conflict. So choose carefully.
One is, we've all been talking very directively to you. And I want to encourage a different you, because many of us have different hats on. You may have parents in your life that you have responsibility to care for. And so this is your prescription from the pastor to start those conversations with parents. you need to be able to just, have some really direct conversations. Good news is you've been causing your parents anxiety for long periods of time in your life. You can do it. You can open up this conversation with them. That's one of the other things that I often hear from folks the most, is that they are struggling with how to care for parents who are failing in different ways, and they want to have important conversations and need a little encouragement in that. But you're within your rights to ask questions about, well, if you live in an MC Escher house, and it feels like there's just nothing but stairs and everybody's getting wobbly. Hey, have you thought about what's going to happen if something feels wobbly? How are you steady on your feet? Are you having that conversation? Oh, Lord, let me just say, you can engage healthcare professionals to have the most dreaded conversation of all time, the driver's license. And they will help you along in some of that, evaluating folks. And that's a whole nother process that we can talk about another time. So I just want to encourage that other generational conversation as well. I do want to say something about hospice. This is a statistic that I always knew from the hospital I worked with more closely up north. At that point, I think almost 3/4 of hospice patients were enrolled in hospice 36 hours, 24 hours before they died. And what that meant was they did not have access to the wide variety of services that were available to them. They never got that hospital bed that could be in their house and could make them comfortable actually staying in their house. They never got access to all the in-care services that were really important. I'm always willing to have a conversation around the faith and spiritual questions around hospice. For a long time, I think people had strange feelings like, oh, it's giving up. I'm here to say, when hospice has become a part of someone's journey, I almost always, as someone who walks with them, see a bump in their life, a moment of additional energy and connection and engagement and relationship, because they're able to focus on what is most important to them instead of, sometimes some really challenging treatment. And so for me, it has been an experience of watching folks live into their deepest values and their deepest joys as they do that. So that's just my little encouragement there.
Yeah, kind of what I wanted to add on to this conversation about advanced directives as well is, it is expected that you will change your mind. And trust me, a number of these forms that you will find in your physician's office, there are more than enough. So don't feel as if this is some precious resource. It is very common to fill one out at some stage of your life, maybe without many medical issues. And then when things change medically, to rip that one up and update it. The first one you fill out is probably going to be the hardest one you'll likely ever do, as you learn how to go through it and get an understanding of what they're asking for. Okay. But as you age and as your healthcare changes, then this is a form that you want to get used to updating. And that's why I say you don't want to be intimidated and ignore or put off doing it because you're afraid it's something that is going to be set in stone, because it's not. And I routinely help patients when they do make that change from kind of life prolonging care to comfort care, to then have them update their advanced directive. Okay. So it's a form you should be filling out and then readdressing on a regular basis as things change in your life.
We ready to take some questions from some folks? We had some submitted ahead of time. Do you all have copies of those? Okay. All right. I'll look those up while we ask some questions here. So any questions for folks up here at this time? And Wendy's available in the chat for folks on Zoom if anybody wants to send questions along to us.
So I talked a little when I introduced myself about what is palliative care. Okay, so as I said, it's a relatively new specialty in medicine that is focused on quality of life, okay, for any individual with a life-limiting illness. Okay, so it is not something reserved only for hospice patients. As I said, as it becomes more widely available, we're learning that there are even greater benefits in improving people's quality of life and their lifespans. Okay. And, it is in this community, it is much more easily found when you're in the hospital, because all the local hospitals have seen the benefit it provides to their patients when individuals are acutely sick enough to have to be in the hospital. And in some communities in Maine, it's harder to find actually outside of the hospital in a clinic setting. But we're pretty fortunate here in Southern Maine is that there is pretty easy access. Okay. So, and I'm certainly willing to help people access it if they need it.
I got a question for Sarah. We got a question about, I had to look this up, about a holographic will.
Oh yeah.
How does a
will.
holographic will work? Does it work? Oh, help us.
Okay, holographic will. Holographic will is still valid in the state of Maine.
What
Has-
is a holographic will?
Holographic will is a will that is handwritten by the testator or testatrix. So if you want to handwrite a will, which does anyone handwrite anything anymore? Okay, excellent. I'm trying to make sure my daughter knows how to write handwritten thank you notes, right? So if you handwrite a will from soup to nuts, that is still valid. It does not need to be notarized. It just needs to be signed and dated by you. So when I get the calls from clients who say, I'm leaving on a plane tomorrow and I want to change something and I can't get them in, that is what I tell them to do. Don't try to, please come in and see me, but it is still valid. What also is valid, I would just say, is there are kind of fill in the blank wills that you can buy at Staples or you can download. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. If you feel like you want some structure to what you're writing, there is a Maine statutory form that is valid here. So if you print that, you can Google Maine statutory will form and you can find it within the Maine laws, Maine probate code. That is valid. That obviously it's in the statute, but it is a better form than just handwriting something yourself. I would use that as your guide if that's something that you want to do. That when you print it, if it is printed and it has it needs to be signed in front of two witnesses and a notary, and they have to be two different witnesses than the notary. So 3 people total have to witness it.
Or you do not need a notary to sign your advance directive.
Very good point.
Recognized as a
Yes.
legal document in the state of Maine.
Yes.
And there are other states where that's true.
Right.
And my recommendation typically is that anyone who leaves the state for an extended period of time, or snowbirds who go to Florida, or seek medical care in the state outside of Maine, is have a notary sign.
So I'm going to say that again for the folks at home and just say, Mark was giving you a good advertisement for the fact that you don't need to notarize the advance directive form here in the state of Maine. If you're traveling, you probably want to have it notarized. So something to think about there.
The top 3 of excuses. Yeah, so I was just saying that one of the other excuses I get for not getting an advance directive completed is because of the requirement for a notary. But the state of Maine does not have that requirement. You can get those documents signed. All you need to do is sign the document in front of 2 witnesses. The witnesses can't be people you have identified as your healthcare proxies. Okay, they have to be other individuals, right? We sign them routinely in my office. Grab a nurse, grab an aide, grab a doctor. They can serve as your witnesses. Okay, but if you spend any time outside of the state, or you get any medical care outside of Maine, then when you sign it, do it in the presence of a notary. Okay. If you need to find a notary,
Come here.
come here. Okay.
Yeah, just a little reminder that one of the things that we kind of keep up here is Christina's certification as a notary. So you are always welcome to come to this office, and we are able to help you with those documents. We're glad to do that. It helps if you bring, I'm around, but I'm also running around a lot. So bring a witness or something,
I just wanted to add one more thing because I can't help myself. I'm assuming that whomever submitted the question, and we're talking about holographic wills, it's the idea of doing something outside of the legal purview. Absolutely fine if that's the route you want to go, but I would also encourage you to look at the beneficiary designations for your retirement accounts and life insurance. And I cannot stress that enough. The will does not control where those assets or how those assets pass. A holographic will or any will that I draft, they're two separate systems. So oftentimes when we start new jobs, right, you go to the HR department, you fill out your form, you say who your beneficiaries are. Guess what? When I had my daughter, my husband and I think my brother was the beneficiary. She was out in the cold on my 401k. I forgot about it. So it wasn't until I left that I remembered I needed to update my own form. It's so important to pay attention to those forms in addition to having a will.
So also what is not accepted as advance directive is a DNR tattoo. Okay, so if you put do not resuscitate somewhere on your body, won't be respected. Okay, landmark case, of course, down in Florida man.
Okay.
But so and that's why we have these. Okay, so in my left hand, this beautiful hunter orange form is the do not resuscitate form. In my right hand, this beautiful fluorescent green form is a pulsed form. That stands for physician's orders for life-sustaining treatments. Why the beautiful colors? Because when they're completed, you hang them in your home, typically on the side of the refrigerator, and they will not be ignored. Okay. Important to do because in the state of Maine, first responders are obligated to resuscitate you unless there is a legally recognized document that says do not do so, right? So if you come to a decision with your healthcare that you don't want to be resuscitated, you need one of these in your home, okay? Having an advance directive that's in a file cabinet that can't be found in an emergency, no fireman, no EMT is going to go looking for that. You will be resuscitated even if your loved one is standing in the way of the first responder and saying, do not do this. This is not what they want. They're obligated to resuscitate you unless they have one of these documents filled out that says, I'm a do not resuscitate.
That's another thing that's available. That's part of hospice care often in home. It's sometimes we have to talk with family members because their first instinct is to call EMTs when someone on hospice passes away. And you don't have to do that if you're enrolled in hospice. You can talk directly to the hospice service and they will handle things from there. We had a couple questions here. Debbie?
You can make a copy on white paper, but once again, you want it displayed prominently. Okay. So not likely to be helpful in the glove compartment of your car. If you get in a motor vehicle accident, no one's going to know to look there. If you're serious enough about wanting that respected, I would recommend you get a medical alert bracelet that says DNR. I'd get a medical alert bracelet that says DNR. Okay. If you're outside of your home and worried about that enough, then that's what I would do. Okay. All right. So, yeah. And so, all right, we don't do a good job resuscitating, right? So, unfortunately, popular media, TV and movies, all right, about 80% of the people who are resuscitated live. That is not true in real life, all right? if you're young and you have a sudden cardiac arrest and there's a defibrillator nearby, you've got pretty good chances. Okay. And by young, I mean less than 50. Okay. Hurts me to say that now. All right. But if you're over 65 with a serious medical illness, like advanced cancer, like lung disease, heart disease, okay. So, and you are sick enough to stop breathing or for your heart to stop, right? The likelihood you will survive a resuscitation is about 20%. The likelihood you will live to leave the hospital is about 8%. Okay. For my patients with advanced cancer, it's typically less than 3%. So we don't do a good job. If you're that sick, a lot of bad things will happen when you get resuscitated. Now, I have lots of patients who tell me, I want you to at least try. And then you're not ready to sign a do not resuscitate if you want them to try. But then you've got to have a conversation with your healthcare proxy about, well, how long would you want to be on life support then? Okay. Because when you're on life support, hooked up to a ventilator, okay, you're sedated and you're paralyzed. No one can have a conversation with you.
I think that's really important for folks to remember. And you know, if you have made this decision in your life, resuscitation is, it's aggressive. It's a, you know, and that's why it's really important when we do have folks who are in hospice to be able to respect those wishes, because the last thing we want to do with the last moments of someone's life is to kind of introduce, you know, it's going to, I'm hesitant to use this word because it's done out of care and love, but it's violent. There's, you know, it's aggressive. And so to be thoughtful about that and making sure that, so to your point, Debbie, the right colors are really handy for folks knowing what they're looking for if they're suddenly in your house. You're right that a copy would probably do some of that function in various places, but the colors are so that the EMT folk who are just kind of stumbling into a place see it and they go, aha, it's not the menu for the restaurant down the road. It's a DNR or it's a post form. So that's a really helpful thing.
Yeah, if you look at the medical literature, there's been surveys of physicians about whether they want to be resuscitated or not. It's over 70% say don't. They would not want to be resuscitated. And that speaks volumes. So the other thing that's helpful when trying to make this decision about when do you become a DNR is what's your prognosis? So essentially that's the question of how long do you think I'm going to live? Okay. Once again, doctors are really bad at answering that question. There's a lot of research about how inaccurate physicians are when answering that. Okay. I think it's a very important question to answer, and I always give my patients an answer, but I've learned I never put a number in front of that answer, because as soon as I do, I know I'm going to be wrong. But I try and give them, okay, a period of time so they understand what they're looking at and they can start setting priorities in their life. Okay, so the one question, okay, that physicians have shown to be pretty reasonable at answering with some accuracy that addresses prognosis is what we call the surprise question. And that is simply, would you be surprised if this patient died within the next year? Okay. And physicians are pretty accurate at answering that. Okay. So if you have questions about your prognosis and what you should be doing with your advanced directives, I would be very open and ask my doctor, how would you answer the surprise question from me? They'll know what you're talking about. Okay. So, but you need help in being prepared for that answer.
Yep.
Okay. That's not one you ask when you're walking out of the door from your appointments.
Yeah. Okay. Wendy, what's up in the chat? Yep. Okay.
Let's jump into it. Here we go.
Okay.
I was going to ask, where's the medical ethicist on this panel?
Okay.
Okay. So, there are a number of terms around this topic that people think are very interchangeable, and they're not. They're very important kind of not subtleties, but important differences between the topics this encompasses.
So
Now,
Mark, I just want to stop for a second and say the actual topic into the mic.
Yeah.
Which is, we're talking about doctor-assisted suicide.
Yeah. So in the United States, there are 10 states, including Maine, as well as the District of Columbia, that allow for medical aid in dying. Okay. So what does that mean? If you are an adult over 18 years of age, you have a terminal diagnosis with a prognosis of less than 6 months, you can provide informed consent, so you have capacity to make a decision. Your decision is not being influenced by a mood disorder like depression. You can demonstrate you're not being coerced into making this decision, and you can self-ingest medications. Then a doctor can prescribe you medications specifically to end your life. It requires a 17-day period of first making a verbal request to the doctor who would write the prescription, having a second doctor confirm your eligibility, and then 15 days from your first verbal request, you can give a second verbal request and a written request where you sign a document generated by the state of Maine. Right? 48 hours after that written request is made, the doctor can then write a prescription for medication specifically for you to take to end your life. You have to be able to drink the medications here in the United States. Okay. So that is what's considered medical aid in dying. So you have to be able to drink the medication. It can also be provided if you have what's called a gastric tube. Say if you can't swallow, but you have a tube that goes directly into your stomach through your abdomen, the medications can be delivered through that tube. And also you can give the medications through a rectal tube. Okay. Right? But you have to be able to assist in providing those medications that way. Right? So that's the law in the United States. Canada also has medical aid in dying, but they allow patients to take IV medications. All right. So physician-assisted suicide is a term that has fallen out of favor because it doesn't incorporate the fact that patients are terminal who are eligible for these medications. Okay. Euthanasia is separate and not done here in the United States because it requires a third party to deliver the lethal medications to you. So it is available in certain countries in Europe and also for certain individuals who don't have terminal diagnoses. So that's the differences between the terms. So it's been present here in Maine for just over the last 2 years. So it is relatively new. Medical aid in dying is here available in Maine.
So remember before when I said, important to have serious conversations with your doctors and with your family and your loved ones and everything like that? Quadruple underline circle, come talk, all these sorts of things, if that's ever a situation that you find yourself in. And Mark, thanks for helping us understand the terminology around a lot of this too. It's important.
So I have a discussion about it, I would say at least once a week. Right? The vast majority of patients, it's all about control. Okay. And if you look at the data that's available from Oregon, where it's been present for over 25 years now, about 2/3 of the people who go through their process, okay, end up using the medications. Okay. There are a third who either never pick them up from the pharmacy or just don't use them. Right? And the vast majority of the patients who do use it or who do start the process, about 80% have cancer. So, right.
Thanks.
Some states that have had it the longest are starting to change their legislation to allow for quicker access. Okay. Potentially providing access to medications same day of the first request, or shortening that waiting period to 48 hours.
Other alternatives to burial. Deb, do you have this one, or do you want me to do some? There are wide varieties that folks are getting into. The other day I was reading about Maine is starting to allow for alkali hydrolysis as another way to handle our human remains. So Maine has been, I would say, it's been a culture shift for me as long as I've been ministering in Maine. Cremation has been way bigger here for a long time because can't dig a hole in the wintertime. The VA cemetery in Augusta is the only cemetery that will actually inter whole bodies during the winter time. And so cremation has been a very common practice here. That results in what is mostly bone, just it's kind of pulverized. And so that's very fine dust that's left of us at that point. The rules and regs in Maine are on your own private property, have at it. Wherever you would like to go, you may go. Cemeteries have their own regulations. So for instance, this cemetery behind our church is maintained by the Cumberland Cemetery Association. They don't allow for scattering of ashes here. So here we can inter ashes behind the church. Supposed to go 3 miles out to sea if you're going to dispose of ashes in the sea. Some funeral homes now will give you a nice little envelope that dissolves in the water. It's a nice thing. Lots of folks are interested in green burial options these days. There is a little bit of a movement here in Falmouth to look for a place that would allow for green burial. No cemeteries existing currently do allow for that. Where? In Maine, but not in Falmouth. Okay, yeah, no.
There's one up near Ellsworth, and one in the southwest of the state.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat. So there's one in Ellsworth and there's one somewhere else. You can look for green burial in Maine. We have adopted all sorts of interesting practices around death and dying and how we handle human bodies. People are choosing to not do things like embalming, those sorts of things, necessarily having a casket. There are wide varieties of options. Funeral home directors are good folks who will actually help you figure out anything that you would like to figure out. They will usually advise you in various ways. If you do have a plot that you've purchased as part of the cemetery, there are usually rules and regs that you'll follow there. Does that kind of answer questions around that? Yeah.
I would just add,
Okay. Well, Deb, why don't you say that and we'll talk more about it.
I was going to mention that in the advanced directive form, there is a section where you can express your wishes about burial and also about body and organ donation.
Yeah. So about body and organ donation. We are very fortunate here in Maine to have University of New England School of Medicine. Okay. They are routinely looking for anatomic donations, okay, for their medical students, for their gross anatomy lab. Okay. There is, believe it or not, an application process. They do not take all comers. So you can find it on their website. You can download the application and fill it out and submit it to them. And if they feel you're an eligible candidate, they will let you know. So that is one way you can go. Okay. So I would also say for those who are looking for more information kind of around this, what to do at the end of life, there is a documentary called Alternative Endings, 6 New Ways to Die in America, right? And it includes everything from green burial to having your ashes incorporated into an artificial reef or shooting them up into space on a rocket. But there also is a gentleman with end-stage lung cancer who goes through the death with dignity process out in the state of California. And you can witness his journey if you want more information. Okay.
Thanks. I want to respond to that kind of offshoot that we had. We have been exploring, since a number of members have often asked to be interred in the cemetery behind the church, whether if the church might purchase a larger plot of the cemetery for a memorial garden, which would just be a place where members could have their ashes interred, and we would have kind of large markers where people would be able to have names and dates and those sorts of things, where we might have more of Forside Church folks all in one place. We're exploring that. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, or have kind of always wondered about being back here, but not sure if you want a whole plot, that would be a discussion that you could come and have with me. And we're tossing that idea around a little bit at this time. Anything else from the chat? All right. Anything else that we should answer here? Mostly. Oh, go ahead.
The advanced directive form is pretty user friendly. It's easy to fill out, and if you need extra copies, they're easily downloadable. And there's also, if you go to the Maine Health website, there's a lot of good information about how to initiate conversations with your loved ones about this topic, and more about filling out the advanced directive.
I'm just going to list, you'll sometimes see another kind of form and document around, which is called the 5 Wishes, which is a little bit more of a narrative kind of approach to walking through some of these same discussions. Often that might be a helpful way to think about having the conversation, I think. John. Okay. Yeah. 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 Final Gifts is the name of the book. Okay. May be available from the library downstairs next time you're in the church.
Yeah, I would also say if, there's a question about whether you think your loved one could benefit from hospice care, okay, you can self-refer. We are blessed with a number of excellent hospice agencies in this area. And they provide wonderful home hospice care. And then we're also blessed because we have a hospice house, the Gosnell House in Scarborough, run by Hospice of Southern Maine. And all the agencies in this area, if you have an interest and you wonder, gee, would I or my loved one be eligible for hospice services? What do I get with that? You can simply pick up the phone and call them, and they'll have someone either speak to you over the phone or come out to your home and give you all the information you need to help you make a decision about whether you think now is the time. Okay? Or, you ask that question of your physician, and they ought to be able to, talk you through what that benefit would be like. Okay. But when you're on Medicare, there is a hospice benefit. So all the services provided are covered. You've already paid for them. And yep. And all the private insurers also have a hospice benefit. that will cover all the services that are provided. Visiting nurse, nursing aid, medical equipment, medications, okay, social worker, chaplain services, volunteers, okay. It can make a dramatic difference in an individual's quality of life, as well as the people who are there helping to take care of them. Okay. So it's never too early to get them involved. Okay. So it can happen where people will graduate from hospice services. Not a problem. You can always come back. Okay.
So I want to, is too much. Let me sum up. I would say this. It feels difficult for us to talk about our own mortality sometimes, to talk about the mortality of the people that we love the most. These conversations, though, I might suggest, are not about dying as much as they are about living more fully with the time that we have. The people that I love, I want them to live the life that gives them meaning, gives them joy, and helps them feel supported and loved by me. So all of these conversations just help us to do that. I want to encourage a couple little things about our church life. First of all, you just run into these people just wandering around, and you could talk to them about anything. I'll also say if there's something that we talked about kind of in passing today as kind of a 30,000-foot overview that you go, hey, I'd really like to know a lot more about that, come and talk to me, and we could maybe have an event that focuses a little more specifically on things. Today, we didn't talk as much about different kind of financial arrangements and how you manage that. That can be an important part. I know because you are here in this church and this church does so much in the community that all of you do a lot with your lives, with your time, with your treasure to make the world a better place. It's a worthy question to say, how will those values be lived out when I'm no longer here? Because that's just more life. Remember what I'm saying? It's not about death, it's about more life. So there are a number of different conversations to be had with folks here. I will go ahead and say, you'll just encounter Mark if that's a part of your journey. You'll encounter Deb in the pews here. I don't know if you've noticed, but Sarah's a practicing attorney and she can be hired. And that is a gift that I would encourage. I think there are folks that may testify to her gifts and her skill in all of those sorts of things. And then I will ask you, if you think about it and would like to, fill out one of the little emergency contact forms in the back of the church for us to keep here in the files here. I also keep a little handy file. I'm not going to give away any names, but it just happened this week that someone, heard an old familiar hymn and said, that's the song I want them to sing over me. And you know what? I never look a gift horse in the mouth. I put that away in a file. And so if you ever think about, what is it going to be like to have a funeral? What is my funeral going to be like? And you want to put down some wishes? I will gladly sit and talk with you. I'll sit and talk with any of your loved ones if you want to do that. I'm also, sometimes I go into the hospital and I'll just sit quietly while you have a conversation with your doctor, and we can sometimes reflect. I don't know if you know this. Bring someone else with you when you talk to doctors. You're going through care. It's very hard to focus and to hear everything that they are saying. A second person is really helpful. I'm glad to be a second person if you can't find someone else.
I'm also going to say, write down your questions.
Yes.
Bring them with you.
Yes.
Don't leave the room till you get the answers you want.
Very good. I'll also say, you can tell me that you want us to sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game as you go out of this church. Funerals are for the living. And some wishes I keep and some wishes we work out among those that are going to be there. I've done both, actually. We have not sung Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and we have one time. Thank you for the gift of this life that we share here in this church. Thank you for the tenderness that it shows that you are thinking about these things in your life, that you're willing to have these conversations. May you do so boldly, trusting in the joy and wonder of this life, and the promise and assurance of the fullness of life we have found in Jesus Christ. Go forth from this place with the love of God and the grace of Christ Jesus and the power and peace of the Holy Spirit. And all God's people say, Amen. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Drive very safely out there, okay?